Good morning. I will formally open and call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for September 5th, 2024. It is 10 o'clock in the morning, and I will go ahead and lead us in the flag salute. If you could please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands justice for all. All right, Commissioners, anything to add to the calendar? I think Derek rescheduled for sometime in October from last time. Okay. So we've got that on there. We've got all of our AOC meetings on, so I think we're good. And just a reminder, we have District 6 meeting on September 19th. So we won't have a board meeting on that day. And also just a quick note that we will be holding an executive session immediately following this formal session to deliberate with persons designated to negotiate real property transactions. Item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi-judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. So I will call for public comment. If you are in the audience, please come forward. If you are online, please raise your virtual hand. And this is for anything, just general comment. If it's not on the agenda, not part of the public hearing. Okay, hearing and seeing none, we will move forward to our department update. And today we are joined by our facilities director, Joe Moore. Welcome, Joe.
How are we doing?
Good.
Well, I guess this is where I give an accounting for what we've been doing. With our maintenance system, the software that we've got, I kind of ran some numbers for you. Going to year to date for January 1st of this year, just kind of give you an idea of what we've been up to. So we've had 1,292 service requests. That's work orders that were submitted. Out of that, there's been 1,109 of those closed. I've got that broke down basically by departments, you know, how many, I don't know if you want me to go that far into the weeds. Mary's up there. No, don't do that.
How many calls per day is that? They're probably to our office, the White House, mostly.
We have a squirrel problem.
No, not too bad. Probably some of the ones that stand out are some of our older buildings, of course. I've got it broke down as far as the type of calls that, you know, we're working on, whether it's plumbing, electrical, any of that. And if you guys ever want any of that information, all you got to do is ask, and I can send that to you. But basically, it's, you know, everybody's staying pretty busy. These numbers do not include like project work, like fixing the porch up above the porch up there on the White House that we just did for you guys the other day. So we'll get a lot of projects that requested from us. So these numbers are just strictly work orders that departments or their designee has put in asking, you know, for something done. Every now and then a work order will get denied. Out of those, we've had since the first of the year, 66 of them that we've denied requests. Reasons for denying a request would be they were a duplicate of another one. You know, so like if you ever hear of a department saying, hey, they denied my request. Well, it might have been a duplicate, or it could be something that it belongs to another department like IT. Us and IT, we overlap in a lot of different areas. So sometimes we'll say, nope, that's not us. We need to send that over to the IT department. And then it could be things that we just typically are taking care of on our own that doesn't need it to have a work order put in. Other than that, that's about it.
Great.
Unless you got questions or anything.
How are you doing in terms of being able to handle everything based on the number of employees that you have?
It can be challenging. Obviously, nobody's gonna tell you they couldn't use another person.
Sure.
We've taken on some of the janitorial duties in the CGIS related areas.
Mhm.
That's saved us a little bit of money doing that. It's also allowed us to have more control over the employee versus having a contractor doing it.
Yeah.
So that has, where that gets into a little bit of can be a problem when people are call in sick or they have a day off, schedule a day off for like vacations or something. Most of the guys are good about stepping up and helping to cover one another. But yeah, we stay busy.
I know you do. Thanks, Joe.
That good?
Appreciate you.
Yes.
Alrighty.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay. Item F is our work session. There's nothing today. Item G is consent agenda. We've got some committee appointments and a bunch of minutes to approve, as well as our contract between the sheriff's office and the city of Sheridan. So some important things on there today. I will move approval of consent. Are there any questions?
No.
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Item H is old business. There's nothing today. Item I is other business, and I1 is consideration of approval of an intergovernmental agreement number PO 73000-000376261 between Yamhill County Sheriff's Office and the Oregon Department of Transportation to provide no-cost commercial vehicle driver and cargo inspections effective for 10 years upon full execution. And we do have our sheriff here today with us in case there's any questions.
I just had a question in terms of, thank you. In terms of the notice in there that said this will be, in other words, they would not be incurring a cost. Are we incurring a cost as a result of this?
So this agreement is kind of a stopgap, so to speak. I've spoken with the chair briefly about the opportunity with ODOT to be compensated for the commercial motor vehicle enforcement work. We currently don't have an agreement with ODOT for this specific function, and we have a deputy who has recently attended a 2-week training course to be able to be credentialed to do this enforcement work. And he is in a period of time now where he has to undergo 32 evaluated inspections where ODOT personnel have to supervise his work. Because there's a few other elements that we're working on as far as the compensated agreement. This allows us to have that agreement in place with ODOT where they count all of the work that he's doing right now towards his certification. And once we complete the other components of the compensated agreement, which you'll see come back before you, they will reimburse us 95% of all of the costs associated with doing this work. So this is formalizing the agreement with ODOT to allow him to be credited for the work that he's doing now to get certified. And then once some of the other components, the Title VI policy for the county are in place, then you will see the compensated agreement come before you, which is what will allow us to recoup 95% of all costs associated with commercial enforcement from ODOT.
Thank you.
Commissioner, any questions?
Nope.
The only question I had was about the impact to agriculture, but it sounds like they are not allowed to pull over those vehicles for inspection. So
Yeah, any commercial truck that is displaying a farm plate in the state of Oregon is exempt.
Yeah.
And is not subject to enforcement.
okay. If there's no further questions. Thank you, Sheriff. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Sheriff.
Thank you.
Let's see. I will move approval of item I1. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Let's see. I2 is consideration of approval of amendment number 6 to agreement number 026028, Board Order 24-29 between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and the Oregon Health Authority in the amount of $49,333.33, retroactive to July 1st, 2024 through September 30th of 2024.
Chair, I'll move approval.
Okay, Commissioner Starrett moves approval. Any further questions?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. I3, consideration of approval of agreement number 177708, Board Order 22-302, amended and restated between Yamhill County and the Oregon Health Authority, extending the term to December 25th of 2025. And this is regarding the agreement that we have already approved and accepted regarding behavioral health housing residential treatment beds. And we are simply extending the agreement with OHA so we can retain those funds and continue to look at investments in our community.
Mhm.
Any questions on that one?
No.
No.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. I4 is consideration of approval of a lease between Yamhill County and the Yamhill County Extension Service District for leased office space located at 2050 Northeast Lafayette Avenue of McMinnville in the amount of 5,800. There's some extra numbers in there. Not sure what the correct amount is. Hopefully it's not $58,000. I can pull it up here really quick. Oh, I've got it. So in the amount of, $5,834.56 per quarter, with a 2% increase each year retroactive to July 1st of 2024 through June 30th of 2028. I will move approval of I4. Are there any questions?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. So we'll correct that one on the record for amount. Okay, I5 is consideration of approval of an agreement between Yamhill County and the Association of Community Mental Health Programs, AOC MHP, for Zero Suicide Initiative implementation, not to exceed $7,000 effective upon full execution through August 29th of 2024. 2025.
Chair, I just want to point out that the high-risk populations we're talking about are primarily veterans and middle-aged and older white men. Those are the populations that are most likely to attempt suicide by firearm. And as you know, I've been working with the Oregon Firearm Safety Coalition. Northwest Seniors also does some work in this area with elderly seniors. So I appreciate the fact that they've signaled out the high-risk group that is in fact most at risk. So I'd move approval.
Important work. Any further questions?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Excuse me. I6 is discussion of your community mediators funding allocation. And Ken, do you want to kind of give us a summary of our discussion here for this one?
Sure, just really quickly, the board may recall that in prior years during prior budget processes, the board had approved discretionary fund allocations to your community mediators. They'd made requests almost on an annual basis and came forward for a request of funds. So we don't have any form of agreement or anything that's in place. So you basically came forward with a request and the board would do an annual, for lack of a better word, grant of funds to your community mediators. When we were processing this year's allocations and starting to get ready to start writing checks, we reached out and to confirm everything was still current. And we learned that your community mediators doesn't exist in its prior format and is now merged with the organization called Neighbor to Neighbor, a regional organization. So as the board had historically and the past budget committees had made the funding allocation to your community mediators, and now there's been a change to Neighbor, I thought it prudent to come back and talk to the board because in the budget, it's identified as releasing funds to your community mediators. And now we have a new organization. So figured the board would want to talk about it and staff's looking for direction on how to proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you said we have Heather here today? Oh, welcome. Come on forward. If you just want to introduce yourself for the record, that'd be great.
I'm Heather Wright. I am the Executive Director of Neighbor to Neighbor, and we provide services in Marion, Lynn, and Benton counties. And then most recently, we've come to help here in Yamhill County.
Okay, so I assume there was a discussion between YCM and you guys and merging folks.
How much history do you want? So I applied for a grant. I was kind of surprised that there was a grant available to provide remote mediation services in Yamhill County through the Oregon Office of Community Dispute Resolution Services. That's the oversight of the community mediation centers, such as your community mediators or Neighbor to Neighbor.
Okay.
And so I went to apply for the grant, and part of that was reaching out to the existing organization and seeing what they need. And I found an organization in disarray, I guess you would say, or disarray, and not functioning well. I met with the board director, Renee Vorm, who said there's a rich history of this. We have the mediators. Here's the part that's lacking. And so through collaboration, who I am as a person, who Neighbor to Neighbor is, we decided that the best thing would just be to merge. And then the mediators that are here, we do mediation from the community to the community. So we're using Yamhill mediators and training more Yamhill County mediators. So we use them in the community, from the community to the community, to provide free mediation services for the people here. So since we took over, ink on the paper was drying in the end of October. We've opened and successfully mediated 71 cases here in Yamhill County.
Oh, wow.
I presently have 4 more open that I just saw yesterday. I was just pulling numbers to see that are open, that are just entirely community cases, which are your neighbors, talking to neighbors. Those are your property lines. City of Dayton's sent some people over. We've done some work within city council and some other places where conversations needed to happen since we've been providing services in Yamhill County. And then we run the small claims mediation program here in Yamhill County. So we have sat in this very room when you're not here, providing mediation services for the people that have filed a small claim and an answer here in Yamhill County. We've just revamped that so that it's more efficient for the courthouse staff here, and we'll have a remote option for people. And then we have our physical location for those that can't access remote successfully or well. So we're glad to be here. I've gone to all of the police, not myself personally, but my staff. We've gone to all of the police stations in Yamhill County and made sure that they know we're open for people, for those places where it's not a crime, but there are things that neighbors or individuals need to work out. So we are active here and growing more active here. And then we do have a DBA to collect funds on agreements or grants that were made to your community mediators. So from the legal standpoint, if a check's written to your community mediators, I do take it to the bank and cash it there.
Okay. Okay.
But we'd rather do business as neighbor to neighbor. That is the name that we'll
Sure.
be using here. Yeah.
Okay. So you answered my question is, how do people access, how do they know about you? But it sounds like you have relationships that were pre-existing, but also with cities and different entities. In terms of the actual mediators, have you sort of brought everybody that was working in Yamhill County under your umbrella?
Affirmative and,
Okay.
and some that maybe had, gone away when it wasn't functioning
Okay.
at its
Gotcha.
greatest. So,
All right.
yeah, we're adding
Sounds
more.
Okay. Any further questions for Heather?
Yes, thank you for being here. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
A couple of things I noted in some of the paperwork leading up to the merger is that, again, when you mentioned that any grants outstanding would continue to go, I feel like we were never advised that Yamhill, that your community mediators was no longer an entity. And it was only because Ken and Carolina were reaching out that we found out that, well, there's sort of under a new umbrella. So I think that was a little concerning in that we've had an ongoing relationship with your community mediators. We understand the value of them. You did answer my question about the number of cases that you're working on, which is very encouraging. But did I misunderstand that those who were in the employer considered staff, from what I understood is that they were no longer going to be associated, or is that just because they would no longer be under the auspices of your community mediators?
So for clarification, all of our mediators are volunteer or pro bono. So they are not staff or employees.
Right.
But the employer, there was one singular one, was let go by their board. And that was part of the conditions I had if I was going to come take over.
Okay, so that particular person
Mhm.
is no longer involved in the organization.
Correct.
And in terms of your other funding, can you give us a little bit of information on where that's coming from?
Primarily, our largest grant comes from the Oregon Office of Community Dispute Resolution Services. Those are funds that are set aside by the legislator for the community dispute resolution centers in Oregon. There are presently 12, soon to be 14 of us that provide services around the state, and then using guidelines in those grants for best practices. And part of that is providing free or at very little cost services to the people we serve. So that's our primary. And then Neighbor to Neighbor also has more recently a larger grant that comes through the CJC for restorative justice work. So in the two counties, two particular counties in the South region, Lynn and Benton counties, we've been working on getting a stronger restorative justice piece going there. We're interested in looking at restorative justice put into place in an adult level. So we've seen it played out at a juvenile level for years and years with great success, where we have a parent, a youth offender and a community member or party that's been harmed, and they come together, and then restitution is set in that process. And we work with the juvenile department to do those things. So that bigger funding right now is a balloon, if you will, or that we would see in our 990s when you look at them to show that we're being funded to expand our RJ programs.
Okay, thank you. And one more question about the training at Linfield.
Yeah.
I know that a credential or a certificate, or I don't know if I would use the word degree, but I guess certificate as a mediator is pretty extensive. So is that pretty much the same thing that's going on at Linfield, or is it just basic training?
So in addition to our basic mediation training, which is 40 hours, I will come in, or others on our staff come in and do conflict management. And we kind of offer a menu, if you will, of anything from 4 hours of conflict management training to a 2-day, 16-hour conflict management training, so that you would get a certificate with the hours and conflict management training under that. So that falls under that, and that was for faculty there.
Thank you.
Okay. Any question?
Nope.
No.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Heather.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming on short notice too.
Yes, appreciate it.
So Ken, I can't remember if when we do discretionary allocations, is there typically a contract that then follows?
No, historically, we haven't done contracts.
Okay.
Within that, we've had the Yamhill County, or your community mediators, sorry, I see YC and I automatically say Yamhill County. The Water Master and CASA are the three organizations that but annually have budgeted an allocation based on requests that they brought forward. But we haven't entered into agreements or any type of contracts with that. In light of current changes, I'm going to be revisiting
Yeah.
that process going forward.
Well, I think it would be more beneficial for you too. So
Right.
that way, if anything changes, it's caught up in the dragnet of all of that and we can see it. So,
Yeah, this has been a process that's been in place that for many, many years.
Yeah.
So I know we've annually, well, as long as I've been in administration, we've had an allocation going to your community mediators.
Okay, so in terms of approving the funding, it's already been approved via the budget process.
Correct.
We
Correct.
just maybe.
The funds have been appropriated.
And appropriated.
Yeah.
So if the board is maybe more comfortable with drafting a, simple sort of contract or grant agreement, whatever you want to call it,
I can put something together pretty quickly.
does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
then we'll put something together and I'll bring that back before the board.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thanks,
and
Heather.
I'll also send it to neighbor so they can review it before. So.
Thank you.
Okay. So that will be coming back at a future date, and it looks like, unless I have. Looks like that concludes our new business. Or other business, excuse me. So before we jump into the public hearing, let's take a quick 5-minute break so everybody can get set. Thank you. Will you Okay, welcome back. It is 10:35 and we are picking up at the point in the agenda, item J, which is our public hearing. J1 is docket PAZ-02-23, a comprehensive plan amendment from public or P to industrial I and a zone change from public assembly institution or PAI to light industrial LI. The applicant is, and there's a correction on this, MV Advancements. And it's tax lot 5417-00301. So I will open the hearing and call for any abstentions by members of the Board of Commissioners. Okay, hearing none. Are there any parties that object to the jurisdiction of this board to hear the matter before it? Okay. Do any of our board members need to announce and state on the record the substance of any ex parte contact or site visits?
No.
Okay. Hearing none, we will have our reading of these statements required by law. Thank you, Ken.
Yes. Oregon law requires that persons who attend a land use hearing be advised of certain rights and duties before the hearing begins. First, with regard to the standards for approval, state law, ORS 197.797 requires that we list the applicable substantive criteria that must be met in order for the county to approve the application. The standards will be listed by the county planner in a moment as part of her staff report. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the standards for approval. Second, the raise it or waive it rule under Oregon law, any issue that might be raised in an appeal of the county's decision in this matter must be raised before the record of the hearing is closed. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision makers and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the board based on that issue. Third, and this is directed to the applicant under ORS 197.796, failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval, again, with sufficient specificity to allow the county to respond to the issue, precludes an action for damages in circuit court.
Great, thank you. And that brings us to our staff report.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
The subject parcel is currently within the Public Assembly Institution District and measures approximately 11.41 acres. The property is located on Highway 99, approximately 1 mile north of the city of Amity. The Southern Pacific Railroad runs along the lot's eastern property line, and Highway 99W is just east of the railroad. All parcels surrounding, except to the east, are EF 80 exclusive farm use. The parcel directly east is zoned HI heavy industrial. Land use consists of commercial farming, a seed elevator complex, vineyards, wineries, as well as an alpaca farm are all nearby. On November 27, 1974, the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners adopted ordinance number 63, which designated the 11-acre property as Special Facility Institutional, PAI Public Assembly Institution, to accommodate the Mid-Valley Workshop and Rehabilitation Center. This application was previously reviewed by the Planning Commission on July 11th and was recommended for approval with the request having a limited use overlay zone. The applicant, MV Advancements, is requesting a comprehensive plan amendment from public to industrial and the zone change from PAI institutional to LI light industrial. The applicant notes that the existing infrastructure and previous type of use is similar and suitable for the light industrial district. Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to the applicant's case. Welcome. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Good morning, Chair Bershauer, Commissioners. My name is Dave Hagerberg. I am the president of MV Advancements. I live at 13951 Northwest Willis Road, and I'm pleased to be here to put on this presentation for the benefit of the commissioners. Before I start with some comments, I want to introduce, of course, Wendy Kellington, who is our legal counsel, and we're delighted that she's going to be doing most of the presentation. But also I wanted to introduce several other people. You know, Luann Anderson is a member of the board of MV Advancements. Ron Noble is a member of the board of MV Advancements, and we're delighted to have them here with us this morning. Kathy Schlotfeld is here. Kathy is the executive director. So with that, I can start with some comments. MV Advancements provides services for people with developmental disabilities, some 350 of them in Polk, Yamhill, and Marion County, and we've been doing this since the middle 1960s. I was here in this room, I hate to date myself like this, approximately 50 years ago, representing MV Advancements when we came then as Mid-Valley Workshop, asking for the appropriate zoning to provide and build the facility that's located on the property in which we're having a conversation today. Actually, we'd started about 10 years earlier, in the old Studebaker Garage in Amity, when Margaret Revis Larson and Vita Kilmer and Ezra Kilmer put together a vision for what we could do to get people with developmental disabilities and enhance and improve their lives. So we came here 50 years ago and asked for the approval to build a facility. Subsequent to that time, that building was used for, as you know, the workshop where we built pallets. We did all kinds of industrial kinds of construction with those types of wood materials. Also, as a part of the operation of that building, there was a separate area that Vita Kilmer operated, and it was our industrial program where we did work for various industries, manufacturing industries, where we would assemble parts and so forth. The one you'd probably recall the most would be ADEC. ADEC was a great and continues to be a great friend of MV Advancements, and we did parts and assembly parts that our clients could do there at the workshop for many years until ultimately now that work is done by our clients there at ADEC, and it's a much more effective community involvement for our clients and people that we serve. But we also did a lot of other things in that building. We did services for many other industries and companies where we did assembly and product work and development. So that's something that's been done for the historical use of that building. One of the other things that we did on the property was we put in a nursery facility, and we grew commercial and retail nursery products and sold them in that location for many years. Basically, and we've got other problems there, the other building, the Revis building, but the whole goal of that was to use those properties to provide employment in all the kinds of things you'd think of, whether it be retail, commercial, or industrial, for the benefit of those clients. And so that's been the historic long-term use of that facility. Times have changed as a result of our programs and how we provide services in the community. And Kathy is going to come up and talk a minute just about how our programs have changed and what brings us and why we're here today. Kathy?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Kathy Schlofeld, address 2115 Northwest West Wind Drive in McMinnville. As far as our changes in how we support people today with disabilities, it's changed a lot in the last 50 years. And I will say that those changes have been really positive for the people in our services. We closed the wood products division in 2018. And all of those individuals moved to community employment. Dave mentioned we have some really great partners here in the county. In addition to ADAC, Bailey's Nursery, we also have a great partnership with Western Oregon University down in Polk County. So that's been fantastic. Since 2018, actually, I guess spring of 2019, we leased the property to an unrelated third party, a pallet manufacturer. They moved out in March of 2024. And as I think it's been noted, we had a potential buyer, an interested party in the property who initially started this rezoning application. In February of this year, they decided to not pursue that opportunity. So we then decided that we would continue with the application for the zone change. And Wendy's here today, obviously, to talk about the details of that. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And Dave, I'm glad you mentioned the 50 years, because as I was reading through the very large packet, I saw your name on one of the notary signatures from like the 80s, and it made me smile. So that was great.
Thank you for
for all of those wonderful remarks. So Wendy Kellington, I am a lawyer working with MV Advancements. My address is 4500 Cruiseway in Lake Oswego, number 340, 97034. The technology gods are not with me today, and so I am going to be working from a printout, the old-fashioned way of the remarks that I had hoped to show you very fancily in a digital format, but we're going to be using two different packages of paper. One is a color of what the PowerPoint that I have for you that we'll go over today. And the other are some relevant code provisions that I think might be useful to you as you go forward with this matter. So without further ado, I would like to go over that PowerPoint. And so the first image that you see is the property from the air. To me, it sort of looks like a court gesture. And when I think of it, I think of my court gesture image put on top of the property. You can see where its location is next to a heavy industrial site that staff mentioned. That is a, grain processing facility essentially. On the next page, you see a county tax map, just kind of gives you the lay of the land. And the third slide talks a little bit about the site and lays out what the different buildings are, how the property is laid out. You can see the former pallet manufacturer's work, that image at C, that area where all the wood is. You can see B is a 2,400 square foot building. A is a 7,000 square foot activity center, office, dryer space, and C, of course, is that warehouse. And then you'll see there's also rail spur access, which makes this property unusual and highly desirable as an industrial site. And then you can also see the heavy industrial site that's next to us, owned by somebody else who's doing grain processing and so forth. So on the next slide, you'll see a slide about what the permitted uses are in the Public Assembly Institutional District that currently covers the subject property. And you'll see that the current zone allows for any use that provides for public or private assembly of persons for religious or charitable, philanthropic, cultural sorts of uses. And you can see that it's really intended for what MV Advancements did with their property for many, many years, and that is to provide a public service by a nonprofit, either a public or a private entity. The zone just isn't set up or intended to allow private industry. So the plan amendment zone change is necessary in order for MV Advancements to sell their property to a for-profit company to be able to use it for purposes even similar to the uses that they've been making it, using it for. So the proposal is to change the plan and zone from public to industrial, and specifically to the light industrial zoning district. And you can see in this map, the pink is everything surrounding the property is zoned exclusive farm use. The subject property is currently, as we mentioned, zoned public. And then you see that heavy industrial site. And I think staff and Dave and Kathy have done a real good job kind of giving you the background. But basically, we had Orchard Vineyard Supply. We were super happy and excited to have them, purchase the property. They got all the way to the board, and then their plans changed for internal business reasons. They decided not to purchase the property. And so in May of this year, we adjusted our application, and that's the one that you see before you. One of the next slide is a comparison between what Orchard Vineyard Supply wanted to do and what MVA proposes. And Orchard Vineyard's plan amendment zone change to light industrial was just for their store. And it's a slide that kind of looks like this, that is the one that tells these things. But MVA wants to be able to sell to another light industrial user because they don't have a particular store they're trying to site. They need to sell the property to a light industrial user who might find joy in using it. Orchard Vineyard Supply wanted to apply the limited use overlay zone to prohibit any other use other than their store on the property. And of course, that doesn't work because we don't have a store anymore. And so the limited use overlay that MV Advancements would ask approval for is a zone that allows all of the light industrial zones and zone uses, including similar uses that are allowed and non-conforming uses that are allowed in the zone. And that's where the second handout, I think, is helpful to you. So the first page is the light industrial district, and you see a list of permitted uses. And if you go to the next page on the back, you'll see that similar uses to those that are listed as permitted uses are allowed. And then you'll see right under that, that non-conforming uses are allowed. And MV Advancements, to the extent they're going to need it, which we hope they don't, still has a non-conforming use for the wood products manufacturing that was going on that stopped only in March of this year. So just to recap, what they're hoping for is your approval of a light industrial, general industrial district that allows the suite of uses that you see on page 1 allowed as permitted uses, as well as similar uses and non-conforming uses, with 4 uses that would be prohibited. And the 4 prohibited uses are municipal water system, municipal sewer system, a caretaker dwelling, and an accessory dwelling unit. Those are the 4 that they are applying the overlay zone to prohibit, but everything else that is allowed in the limited use, limited industrial zone would be allowed. And that's your first 2 pages. The next slide is about our traffic analysis. And what you'll see is that, and staff did a really good job, I think, of analyzing this as well, is that the potential traffic impacts are far greater under the existing public zone than if we change the zone to LI. And as staff points out, the kinds of things that are allowed in the public zone would be a church, school, things like that, which have far more intrusive traffic impacts than what we're talking about in the light industrial zone. So the traffic impacts are not adverse and actually less impactful than the existing zoning. ODOT does not have a problem with the proposal. And Portland and Western Railroad, who owns the rail spur and the rail line adjoining the property, has advised, and the record supports, that they've had many recent inquiries for properties with rail spur for lumber, forest products, renewable diesel, sand, corn. And they said, quote, property with an existing rail spur is difficult to find and highly sought after. So the property is unusual. You see in the Yamhill County Economic Opportunities Analysis for 2017 that the county identified that it needed a little bit more industrial zone land in order to support many of its, rural industrial uses. So there's kind of a need for property like this, as staff outlined as well. We looked around for comparable light industrial zoned properties, and we discovered that there aren't any available. What is available either doesn't have rail or spur access, they're occupied, not for sale, they're too small, made up of lots of tiny lots, they don't have good visibility, they have bad access, like through neighborhoods and stuff like that, which is an impact that I think most people would want to avoid. Your Planning Commission, after a thoughtful, comprehensive staff report, gave their approval. We had one dissenting commissioner, but it wasn't that he was dissenting against MVA. he was very supportive of NVA. He just didn't like the limited use overlay zone. He felt it was too restrictive. And so he voted against the motion to approve the proposal with that limited use overlay zone.
Well, and Wendy, I think that's my question is why those four? I mean, some of them seem like they're sort of non-applicable, but was there pushback in terms of the neighbors on some of those?
No, there isn't any pushback. Here's the truth of it, to be completely honest about it. So when Orchard Vineyard Supply went to their public hearing before the Planning Commission, they followed somebody else, and I don't remember who it was, but they followed somebody else who didn't want a limited use overlay zone. And the Planning Commission was really clear that they thought that anybody who did a zone change ought to be thinking about a limited use overlay. And so it was in that spirit, well, they want it, we'll give it to them. Because these uses that we're excluding are not a big deal. They're not necessary to us. And we thought if as a policy matter, the Planning Commission feels more comfortable with that, heck, let's do it. So that's really 100%
Okay.
what it's about. And we're totally good with it being applied. So that's
Thank you.
kind of a silly reason, but that's the truth of it. So we ask the board then, I've got a slide, it says MVA's request to BOC to affirm your Planning Commission or accept their recommendation, I guess, and approve the change to limited industrial, allowing MV Advancements to do all of the uses allowed in the light industrial zone, minus the 4 that we said we'll give away with the overlay zone. But we do ask that you expressly allow uses that are similar to those that are listed in the LI zone, which is what the LI zone allows. As you see on page 2, that's 702 of my second pile of papers, says that similar uses are allowed, and those are anything that's not specifically listed as a permitted or conditional use that's similar in character, scale, performance to permitted uses can be allowed. And we just want to make sure that if somebody comes in to buy the property whose use isn't expressly listed, but who's awful darn close, that they could get to yes without a whole lot of, well, without having to change the zone again. And then also on the next page, you'll see that we would also like you to just clarify that non-conforming uses would be allowed as state law allows, and as again, that page 2 of the zoning district allows. And of course, we understand that if the non-conforming use is lost, if it isn't started up again by March of next year, it's gone. We understand that, but we'd sure hope that in your approval that you would move approval of the application to allow the uses that are allowed in the light industrial district to include similar uses and non-conforming uses, minus the 4 that would be prohibited in the overlay zone. We would really appreciate it if you would include that in your motion and order, because as it turns out, one of the folks who seems to be the most interested would be manufacturing products from wood. And turns out that there's an issue about that we're going to talk about next. But I have on my next slide, extremely important in all caps and bolded, that we ask that you please expressly include similar uses and non-conforming uses as allowed uses. This is necessary because the limited use overlay is the zone that's being applied. And it says what I screenshotted there. And I also on page 3 of your second pile of papers actually gave you that district so you can see it in the flesh. But what the dang district says, it says when the limited use overlay district is applied, the uses permitted in the underlying zone shall be limited to those specifically referenced in the ordinance adopting the little limited use overlay district. And so what that says to me is that notwithstanding that first page of the code provisions I gave you expressly says that similar uses and non-conforming uses are allowed, it kind of tells me that if we don't import that allowance into this overlay zone, that there could be an argument we can't do them and cause problems for a buyer that I don't think staff wants us to have, or you'd want us to have, or anybody'd want us to have, but there it'd be. So that's why we're really hoping that you're express that similar uses and non-conforming uses are part of the uses that would be allowed. And I want to assure you that that would be consistent, as we say in our next page of this slide page, with our application. We requested all of the limited, or no, why do I want to say it? Light industrial uses and similar uses in our application. And we explained our understanding that the existing non-conforming wood products forest processing that was going on was actually allowed in the LI zone. We had no idea that that wouldn't be allowed in the zone. And I screenshotted our application request that says that we were asking for uses allowed in the code and similar uses approved. And then we said, please note this list includes industrial uses, which include wood/forest products processing and manufacturing, which are among the suite of uses that have historically occurred on the property. So that's kind of what we thought. But as it turns out, staff, and we've worked really well with staff and really appreciate your staff. They've done a great job for us on this. But it turns out they have a different view of the county's code. They interpret that, and this is where, and we don't really need to duke it out, but I just want you to understand the issue. So they interpret that yellow highlighted part of the permitted uses in the LI zone that says farm, industrial, or contractors' equipment or materials manufacture, blah, 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 is allowed in the zoning district, to say that materials manufacture made from wood or forest products are excluded. So that's how staff is reading that. And that's what they say in the screenshotted part of the staff report, where they say the applicant states that historically MV Advancements processed forest products in their workshop, and that's considered an industrial use. However, this use is not listed as a permitted use in the light industrial zone. Manufacturing of forest products is permitted within the heavy industrial district. And regardless of how you view that, I think we solve this problem certainly if you're allowed to manufacture materials from, metal, corn, I don't know, sand, whatever else it might be, that you should be in an industrial process, that you should be able to manufacture it from wood. It seems like that similar use provision on that number, that second page, that says not specifically, a use not specifically listed, but similar in character, scale, and performance is allowed. It seems like if you manufacture from wood, that should be allowed. So if we make sure to add similar uses as an allowed use, then I think we take care of the concern. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense at all?
I think the part I'm confused about is, wouldn't that be covered with a non-conforming use?
It would, but we will lose the non-conforming use after a year, and the folks who were in there left in March because they were supposed to leave under our purchase and sale agreement with Orchard Vineyard, and they left, but Orchard Vineyard didn't buy the property. And so we will lose that in March, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to get somebody up and running again.
Okay.
So that's why we need to find a way that manufacturing of materials that come from wood are not excluded. And I think if we just are careful to make sure similar uses are allowed, and if somebody comes in before March, non-conforming uses are allowed, I think we solve this problem. I want to point out, as I say in our next slide, that interpretation that materials manufactured from wood, forest products is prohibited, but farm industrial materials is allowed. We don't understand how they're different. Staff says they're worried that there is just too much overlap in saying that manufacturing from wood or forest products is allowed in the LI zone because that's expressly allowed in the heavy industrial zone. But if you look at the two zones, there's already a whole lot of overlap between them. So I'm not sure how much of that concern is one that is persuasive. But again, I think you solved the problem with this adding the similar use, making sure that that's allowed. So our next to last, or almost next to last slides are, we say, however you slice it, making pallets, poles, sawdust from wood should be allowed in the LI zone, either as a permitted use or as a similar use. And the similar use addition should resolve this matter. But it's really important that it's clear that similar uses are allowed so that materials manufactured from wood can be allowed on the property and there isn't a lot of disclarity. Does that make sense? So we request, I have a slide that says applicant requests the following. Number one, please be clear that MVA's overlay zone allows similar uses, just like the LI zone says. Number two, be clear that it also allows non-conforming uses, just like the LI zone says. And if you want, but it's not necessary, you could interpret your code's express authorization for farm and industrial materials manufacturing to include materials manufacturing from wood, AKA forest products. But the first two are vitally important to MVA. So with that, I just want to reinforce what staff has said, what your planning commission found, that the proposal meets all standards, and MVA Advancements greatly respectfully requests approval with the addition that similar uses and non-conforming uses are expressly allowed within their overlay. And unless you have questions, again, just thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Wendy?
No.
Nope. Okay.
Should I
Thank
go
you
away?
very much.
Go back?
Yes, we've got a
Okay.
few things to get
Perfect.
through.
Thank you.
So we had a little bit of testimony in support of the application, but I do want to call for further testimony in support of the application. If anyone would like to come forward, or if you're on the virtually, please raise your hand. Okay, then we get to the appellant's case. Doesn't sound like there was an appellant. No other testimony. Well, I guess I should call for other testimony in opposition, if there's general opposition. Okay, that brings us to public agency reports.
Hi there. The county sanitarian responded by stating that a change in zoning will not have an impact on the suitability or lack thereof of the property to support development. Any change in the use of existing structures or future development will have to meet all septic requirements as outlined in OAR Chapter 340 Division 071 and 073. And we also received a response from ODOT. They provided an email and the original application permit for the road approach for the Mid-Valley Rehabilitation Center. ODOT expressed that they had no objection to the proposal as submitted.
Great, thank you. I'm assuming there's no rebuttal by the applicant. And that brings us to staff recommendation.
Staff believes the applicant has addressed the requirements of the relevant comprehensive planning goals, administrative rules, and sections of the Yamhill County zoning ordinance. Our office recommends approval of the comprehensive plan amendment and zone change with a limited use overlay that prohibits the municipal water system, municipal sewer system, caretaker dwelling, and the accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, thank you. So I will
Ken
close,
has-
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna just add a few things if I could. I think we were trying to say that, you know, in the heavy industrial zone, you could have something like Willamina, you know, lumber mill. It was not intended to say that you couldn't do manufacture of wood products, because that's what our manufacture of products from wood, because that's what they've been doing, and so that was not the intent. The similar use is a process, but it's also been used frequently to approve uses that are just similar. So there was no intent to not allow them to do a similar use, and having that noted in the findings would be fine with us. So I think that's the only things.
Okay. Okay. So I will go ahead and close the hearing and open us up for deliberation. Commissioners, any questions for Ken?
Just one question. If that is noted in the findings, would that not, what would the motion include if that was just something in the findings?
Just to say, to note that similar uses are allowed with this limited use overlay. So, you know, if there's manufacture of machine tools is one of the uses that's permitted. And if the applicant wanted to apply for a similar use to that use, it's allowed. That the limited use overlay is not intended to prohibit that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I would like to attempt the motion. I move that we uphold staff recommendation and approve the comprehensive plan amendment from MB Advancements regarding tax lot 5417-00301, which would change from public to industrial, and a zone change from PAI to light industrial. With the limited use overlay, which is part of that, but also be clear that the overlay zone does allow similar uses, and the overlay zone does allow for non-conforming uses. And just to be super clear, that the code does authorize farm and industrial materials manufacturing to include materials manufactured from wood or forest products. How's that?
Perfect.
All right. Any further discussion or deliberation? Did I miss anything? Okay. No further discussion?
Good.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. We do need to schedule the findings.
Yes. Just because one of our attorneys is off this week, I'd suggest 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Okay, does that work for you guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So we will schedule findings for September 26th. All right. And that brings us back into our agenda. We can take a quick pause here. I just want to make sure everybody can get their stuff wrapped up and everything from the hearing.
Or we're going to executive session after this. So if you wanted to go ahead and conclude session, and then we can adjourn. clear the
Okay.
Room and
I
then
think
go into
we might
executive
have a
session.
couple announcements actually. So let me see. Okay, why don't we just tackle announcements while folks are wrapping up here, but
I'd like to announce that I finally made it to the meeting just in time for you to adjourn, so. Those tricky Canadian ISPs apparently were conspiring against me, so I apologize.
Talk to Shane.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So House Bill 4002 deflection, committee, I guess we're an unofficial committee, met last Thursday, and we just wanted to make sure that we were ready for go time September 1st with our deflection plan. And we were able to finalize all of the forms and the process. And we did hire Carol Ann Van Wert to be the deflection coordinator. So very excited for that. House Bill 4002 changes went into effect September 1st. And so far we have just some sort of high level response so far, but essentially we've had a few citations, quote unquote citations over the weekend. And of those few, a couple of the folks have already accessed the deflection plan and treatment assessment through HHS. So that is promising. Hopefully that continues. But there's already been some tweaks, which we knew. It's sort of a work in progress. We're going to have to tweak it over time, but so far so good. The air show was a success. I don't know if anybody was able to make it out there, but great time at the air show. I think we had some record attendance levels too. I have to go back and check with the team, but that was really special too. And they recognized the city of McMinnville for, and specifically the police chief, Matt Scales, for just their dedication and helping to make the air show, help to get the air show to come to McMinnville. So, and that was my only other announcement other than congratulations to our kiddos going back to school and praying for a safe year. Any other announcements?
I got nothing.
Just want to let you know, we had our ASA ambulance service area meeting yesterday at the hospital in McMinnville. And we had a meeting of all of the fire districts, the chiefs, Health and Human Services. We talked a little bit about the ASA plan update, which we know we've been working on for a very long time. And it's going to be sent to the state pending approval. And usually that requires a number of different revisions by the state, OHA. They'll send it back to us, and we will hopefully have that done soon. We talked a little bit about the staffing ratios and how that legislature approved nurse staffing ratios is impacting not only the hospitals not being able to fully staff based on these ratios that are now required by law, but also that it's really impacting ambulances that are backing up because they cannot deliver a patient to the emergency room based on the staffing ratios there. So ambulances are out of service and backing up, and they're being basically just left there until someone can bring them in, someone can bring a patient in. So this is really, I think, just editorial here, that it's really impacting not only the situation at hospitals who really, their hands are tied in terms of staffing, but it's also impacting our paramedics, our fire districts, and the fact that we're taking ambulances off the road to sit in front of a hospital. So that's something I'm hoping that the legislature will revisit, because it's not having the intended consequences. It's really been a problem.
Thank you. Any further announcements?
No.
Okay, there's nothing else for the good of the order. I will adjourn the Yamaha County Board of Commissioners formal session for September 5th, 2024. It is